Another week of PQs are in the books, and we're well into season 1 of Star Wars Unlimited, and we're here tonight to break down the data from the last week's PQ meta share, talk about some leaders and bases that we're a little high on, and we're getting ready for our PQ this weekend. So we're going to talk about how we're going to decide what we're going to play, what we should play, what we're worried about, and maybe what you should be worried about as well. I'm Jordan from the Colorado Cantina Crew, and I'm joined by Kyle and Sharkey. What's up, guys? Welcome in.
Hey, what's going on?
It's always great when we talk in unison, right? Where I say, "What's up, guys?" and you get it. That's the classic. That's how you know you're all together.
That's how we know we've made it.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So good stuff going on here in Colorado. It's just it's crazy hot, but things are heating up as we get ready for our team testing tonight, right after we're done recording. And like I mentioned in the intro, our PQ is this weekend. We got blessed this set for Denver, getting 2 PQs. One at Mythic Games, which we play at a lot, and then another one at Total Escape at the end of the month. So not sure if this is the main event or if this is the warm-up, but I'm excited either way. I know Kyle and I have points on the board, and we're excited to get in another PQ. And Sharky, you're coming off a great performance at Gen Con, so a lot of good stuff to dive into today. Whew. Well, we've been practicing. We've been trying to get our stuff together, trying to figure out what decks we're going to play. Sharky might not be playing CAD, right? I know Kyle's on a couple different things, Quinn, Han, whatever in the air. And I thought I was settled until earlier today. So we're going to use this as an opportunity to try to find faith a little bit and decide what we should be playing. So, man, last week was pretty cool, right? Like, we got a great mix of leaders coming in hot. You saw Kaz's win. Kaz's getting the top 4. I'd love to see that.
Yes, I know you like to see that.
Yeah, one. A lot of Quinns, a lot of Sabine's doing well. Talzin not doing too hot. Boba Data Vault, like it's a really wide open meta, isn't it, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. I sat down. I wanted to spend a little bit of time and try to just look at the numbers. Let's see, what last weekend there was 13 total PQ level events, right? Mm-hmm. So the first thing I wanted to do was take a look at the win share for who won, right? And just kind of look at the dispersion, right? Because it seems like the meta is pretty balanced, So as I classified the decks, I went and looked through, and aggro totaled about 39% of the meta, right? Mid-range 46%, and control 15%. So that's for the winners, right? What we're showing here now is then we broadened it out and looked at all of the players who made the top 8. So if you add up all of the top 8 players from all 13 events, what did it look like? And the interesting part was it was about the same. Yep. So aggro 36%, mid-range 48, control 16. So it really stayed balanced. So, I mean, what that tells me is that as I'm going into my PQ field this weekend, it's probably going to be a pretty balanced attack. I'm going to run into all different attack vectors. And so to me, that means I need a deck that's good, capable into a wide field that I'm comfortable playing, right?
So the next question I know that we're going to inevitably get, how did you arrive at what classifies as aggro, mid-range, and control here?
Yeah, so when you look at most decks, right, I mean, some of them are pretty obvious. Sabine, for the most part, aggro, right?
Well, it trades a lot, Kyle.
Yeah. You still have an aggressive strategy, right? When I'm saying aggro, I mean, I'm trying to kill you quickly. I'm trying to go to base. If we end up in a long game, that's not where I want to be, right? As far as control, I clumped together soft control and hard control. The majority of what you saw here was soft control. We're talking like Iden Data Vaults. Well, that's probably more hard control, but Kylo Data Vault, Iden, there was some Palp in there, right? That sort of thing. So we're talking control strategies. And then the rest of the stuff is in the middle, right? You're talking Talzin, Quinlan, Han, a lot of these decks that are kind of fighting in the middle. So, mid-range had the highest share of play. I was surprised to see aggro jump up, but after we talked last week, our video was kind of, hey, is soft control on the rise? Because we had very little data, but that very first week of PQs, it was it was control that was at the top, and so it was interesting to see just a week later how much aggro just poured into the meta, to beat down that control.
Yeah, and as we take a look at the total play share from this past weekend, it's pretty mixed. I mean, we have Mother Talzin leading it off. We have Han Solo in second, Quinn from there, Kylo. This is combining, I think, just Data Vault, or no, this is Target Town and Data Vault for Kylo, and then we have Boba really having a strong weekend, man. That Boba deck, I wanted to save some time to talk about him specifically. But yeah, just a really interesting field, and I think our last video, like we mentioned, was really talking about control and how we thought that it was going to come back. And I think it's still, in the area. I think a lot of these super aggro decks that popped up this past weekend, the Kaz Blue that had the creature package, the Han Solo builds from Worlds and etc. The Kaz Tarkin Towns as well. They struggle against the really hard control stuff. They're better into the soft control for sure, but they struggle into hard control. And that's probably one of the reasons why I won't play Kaz this weekend, is that as you see the data vaults of the world with either Kylo or Iden gaining popularity, they're challenging. Kylo's not as bad, obviously, but if you don't end the game before they flip, like you're probably going to lose. So really interesting meta share. And I want to go back to the top 8 graphic we had really quick, because I think one thing that people might say is how did we get these numbers? And the one deck that'll probably be the biggest source of that conversation is the GAR ECL. And Kyle, you were the one who did this classification, so do you want to explain why GAR fell into that category for you?
Yeah, so to be sure we're on the same page here, GAR ECL I classified as aggro.
That's what I'm saying.
In my view, yeah, if I'm playing GAR ECL, I'm trying to get the base, I'm trying to get you dead. It's a little bit later of a leader flip, right? But it's an impactful flip. You know, usually on the GAR flip turn, you're trying to end the game, right? You don't really want to go too much past that, hopefully. At least the GAR builds that I've run into. I mean, there are GAR ECL decks out there that are trying to hit you with Vader, maybe extend a little bit more. But in general, it's a very aggressive strategy. Primarily in space is what I run into, you know, trying to control from the ground a little bit. But yeah, you could quibble with how I classified these things. GAR, I put into aggro. Kylo, I put both Kylo ECL and Kylo Tarkin Town into mid-range. You could argue that maybe Kylo Tarkin Town is an aggressive strategy, but I think it's more of a mid-range. And then obviously Kylo Data Vault into the soft control range, right? So yeah, I took some liberties with how I would classify things, but I think for the most part, it's depending on what strategy you're trying to take to win is how I kind of put these together.
Yeah,
I think the classification is less something to quibble about, so much as explain your work. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what I was going to say too, Sharkey. And you have this build here, and it's interesting to see what we think is going to happen next week, where it actually is impactful for us, right? Kyle, we went to the Albuquerque PQ, and that was the first week of PQs. Gen Con was happening that week as well, and obviously we were coming off Worlds, so a lot of influence from what happened at Worlds in that first week of the meta. This week, this is week 3, give or take, right, where things are really starting to build up. There's a lot of data out there. There's a little bit more time for experimentation, as opposed to if you're just coming straight off of Vegas and jumping into a new deck. So do we think that this split will stay even going into this week? Do we think that'll be mid-range with the biggest representation in top 8, then aggro and control, or do we see any big changes happening?
Yeah, I want to see if the wheel keeps on turning, right? So coming out of Worlds, some of the decks that, did the best, I would classify as mid-range, right? We saw, at least in my categorization, I put Kylo Tarkin Town, I put Talzin, I put Han all in mid-range. So it seemed like kind of mid-range was king coming out of Worlds. And then that first week out, we saw Control, at least there weren't very many PQs, but in that week 1, Control kind of came in and beat up the mid-range. And so now it's interesting looking to see the rise of aggro going into week 2, holding down Control. So do we keep going in a wheel? Do we see a rise of one in circular order, or do you try to? I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you try to get ahead of the meta, or do you try to play off the data of what's doing well today?
Yeah. And another question that I want to earmark for our conversation. So we have one earmark so far for a Boba data vault and another one for this, is that how much are you letting this data inform your experience? Right. Especially if you're confident in your prep, confident in your experience, how much should you be dissuaded by these sort of things? And we'll talk about that later in the episode. But as we go into this week, Sharky, what's your prediction? Do you think that that mid-range is here to stay? Do we think that we're going to see even more aggro? People excited to see that Sabine Red. I know you were excited to see it. The
Sabine Red was really cool to watch.
I think that that's something to be said. A lot of people enjoy playing aggro, and for the past 4 months, there really hasn't been a ton of aggro.
Yeah, I don't know for sure if it's going to keep churning too much. I think locally we'll probably see a rise on that control number and a little lower on the mid-range number. But I don't know if that's going to be more than a local thing for us, or if that's going to be across the rest of the world. And honestly, with as much thought as I put into just our local stuff, I don't know that I really have a good feel for what else might show up, but I wouldn't be shocked to see the aggro number stay where it is and see the mid range get eaten into a little bit by the control.
Yeah. I think for anybody that listens to our content a lot or watches our content a lot, Colorado and Colorado Springs specifically kind of leans a little bit more control heavy. There were tournaments through set 1 and 2 where sometimes I would be the only Sabine player, or it'd be like myself and Kyle, or myself and Kyle's wife Jillian, right? Like
So
there wasn't
on that point. There's a couple of Boba Data Vault players that I can name off the top of my hand too. They're probably also hoping that it goes that direction.
Yeah, that have loved Boba Data Vault as well, right? So that's an interesting deck to talk about. So that's let's go to Boba right now, and I think that Luke Pilot fits in there as well, right? Like you have 34 HP, you have a lot of abilities to either ping damage or do indirect damage for whatever it is. I think they end up in a similar result, either, you know, Luke directly pinging your opponent's units or the indirect choosing to not take a bunch of damage on base, right? So when you're looking at these decks, like, why do you think they're doing so well, Kyle? Why do you think that Boba had such a good week last week?
Well, I mean, I guess it's probably into the field, right? So we saw this rise of aggro, and to your point, Boba Data Vault has a lot of HP, right? And so it's hitting you from an aggressive lane in space, and then it's going to just try to race you because it can pour on the indirect damage. And if you're playing an aggro deck, you know, you don't have a lot of places to hide that damage, and you're only running with a 25 HP base, right? So yeah, I think Boba Data Vault did very well because it can, you know, race essentially in a number of ways. Some of these aggro decks, the Boba Flip can help kind of kill something that's problematic and continue to pour the damage on, that sort of thing, right? Whereas in my experience, Boba Data Vault doesn't do as well into control. I mean, it has tools with bombardment and these sort of things to try to finish a game, but a lot of these mid-range or control decks might have a lot of healing, right? Especially Han Blue, I think was probably a problem for that deck, right? Because, you know, I just put all the indirect damage on my base and I keep healing it off. I have all these units with huge butts that I can hide the damage on. I mean, it's probably generally doing well because of the fall of Han. So if Han goes down in utilization, then that gives a space for Boba to come in and beat some of the decks that are rising up.
Sharkey?
I mean, I think he covered most of it. The other part of why I think Boba is generally a good or well-positioned deck is because of how much both indirect and direct damage it does.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's very good into the Rise of Aggro stuff because of that. And I do think it has some pretty good punch into control because how much damage you can basically put them in check very early, unless the control deck can get some form of control started early.
Yeah.
And then sometimes as a control deck, you're kind of playing with what you got. And sometimes it's not the best way to wrangle control until later in the game. And it might be too late by that point. Boba does a good job of being fairly linear on the push damage fast.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you have initiative, that general pride play is brutal for some decks to handle. Like if an Iden doesn't have power or a way to kill that on turn 1, like you're probably taking 10 damage, right? Like,
yeah.
I think I was watching the final. Was it the Oregon PQ? It was definitely on the West Coast. It was one of the last PQs running at night. And the final was the Boba Data Vault against an Iden. And both times the Boba player had no play on turn 2. And I just thought, this is over. You can't be missing turn 2 plays against control. And he came back around. He got it both times. And a lot of that was just, he just kept chipping away. You know, to your point with pride, there was a couple of times where I thought he was going to hit with pride. Instead, he claimed because he wanted the initiative to hit with pride again right away the next turn, get a little extra damage. And then, you know, he got his win with planetary bombardment. So, you know, it performed really well into that hard control. So I guess to your point, like it's well positioned into aggro. It has tools into control. You know, the problem for it can be some of these mid-range decks that heal. And if we see the mid-range decks that heal kind of falling away, then it's got its opening.
Yeah, it leaves a space.
So we're getting all this data from swoobase.com. Just amazing website. It came out a little bit through last set, and just incredible data. Like there's so much that we can't even show it all because it doesn't fit on the screen in a nice way. We're going to work on that in the coming weeks. But so this is the full season data right here, I believe. Let me just double check. Yeah, this is the full season leader percentages as we're looking right now. So we start with a big percentage of Han, right? That's including Galactics. And then we see Towson, and now obviously Towson has kind of overtaken Han as the most popular deck. Is that going to stay this way? Is Towson going to be the most represented this weekend, even with everyone knowing how she didn't really overperform last week? And I guess it'd probably be more fair to say that she underperformed.
I think that's a tough call to. Yeah, I think it's a tough call to make because I don't know that she necessarily underperformed. I just don't think she's quite as easy as a lot of people maybe assumed she was to play. And I say easy to play in relative terms. I do think it's a little bit easier to pick up a Han solo kind of deck where you can play things under curve and be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna play under curve the whole time. Whereas Talzin requires a little more nuance to be really good with her. And so I think you're seeing some of that, but I do think because of that, the ones who picked her up will stick with her instead of just dropping off the face.
Yeah, I think so. The page that you just showed there is the total played, right? So for all of season 1, what leaders have been played. Han being at number 1 was kind of the boogeyman pre Galactics. We saw just a lot of Hans being played. He's, to your point, going down and down in play rate. However, if you then shift, I think we have the graphic where you can show the top 8 conversion rate. So this shows how much each leader is being played, right? And the next one's going to show how much are they converting, right? And so looking at the top leaders, those are the ones I was most interested in. Talzin has the highest negative conversion rate from the top decks, meaning it's played a lot, but its conversion to top 8 is pretty low compared to the amount of play it's seeing. And to your point, Sharkey, that could be just it's hard to play or that people don't have as much experience with it, but it's underperforming, right? The other one that I saw that's underperforming in play rate versus conversion rate is Vader Pilot. So we see quite a bit of Vader Pilot, but its conversion rate is also below its play rate, right? The ones that are holding still up there, Han still gets played a lot. It converts pretty even, right? It's still a good deck. It does a good job. It doesn't go up, doesn't go down. It's kind of where it belongs. Same is true for Sabine, and same is true for Kylo generally. The one that has overperformed is Quinlan.
Yeah.
The play rate on Quinlan remains lower probably than it should be, and it converts up. It did really well this last weekend, right? It had a couple of wins. It was highly represented in top 8s, whereas in the total field, it was underrepresented compared to its conversion rate. Quinlan's another one of those decks, though, that also requires skill, like Talzin, to your point. So it is played by the masters. We used to hear that a lot with Han 1, right? People who would win with Han 1 yellow were the masters of Han 1 yellow. Quinlan tends to be that way, in my view. So you saw Mickey D get his first PQ win of the season. Right? He was doing it with Quinlan, and he's kind of known as a Quinlan master, right? So, you see those people who are good at Quinlan converting with Quinlan, but it's still underrepresented as a whole converting over. So, that's kind of how I see it.
I forget where I saw it, but someone called the decks like that the specialist decks, where it's like you kind of need to be a little bit of a specialist to use that deck well, but if you are, it pays off very well. And I think there's a couple of decks in the current mix right now that I would consider to be specialist decks.
Yeah, I think what I would say about those decks specifically is that there are some games that you play when you get to like a certain level of competitive competition that if someone knows that matchup amazingly, it just feels so stifling. Right. I've had maybe like a handful of experiences where those feelings come up, typically with Han 1 yellow and Quinlan, right? Where they just, it just feels so smothering that you don't really have recourse for things. And I think Quinlan and I think Talzin to an extent also has that experience. So time for that second earmark where we're talking about our experience versus the data. So I've obviously been playing Talzin quite a bit since Afterworlds. I kind of haven't played Han Blue very often, haven't played Han Green. Practiced quite a bit, went to the PQ with not as much experience as I would have liked, played well, whatever. Have been playing it since and feel, I'm really getting the flow of it. I've made a lot of changes to combat control and do this and that. And all of a sudden you see the data, you see it. Well, I've been doing great. I've been testing against you guys. I know Sharkey, we played a bunch last night. We're going to play a little bit after this, et cetera, et cetera. How much do you let this data influence what you're doing? Like how much should you, right?
I don't tend to put a ton of weight onto the general population of decks. It's interesting to look at, and it is good to know what a lot of people are struggling into, but I tend to prioritize the data in our practice than I do like higher than the general population data. And because of that, sometimes you make some weird meta calls, but usually that's because we know who's a specialist and who on our team is good with a particular deck. And sometimes the matchup between someone who knows a deck very well and someone who is just picking it up versus when both players know the matchup very well, that sometimes that matchup can flip 180 degrees, right? It can be really good for someone who has very little experience and then flip to completely terrible for when someone knows how to attack you with that deck. And so usually I tend to prioritize at least our data internally, but it is good to be informed by the wider picture still.
Kyle?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two areas to consider. I like to look at the overall meta just to kind of gauge what I think I'm going to see. Right now, we have a very balanced meta, so it tells me I'm going to see everything. Right? If I was looking at that saying, "Hey, aggro is really suppressed," it might inform some deck decisions. Right? So, say I was playing Han Blue, I might move Chirrut to the sideboard if I did not think aggro was going to be present. Right? But in general, this tells me I'm going to see a little everything, so I need to have some balance in my strategy. The second thing I like to look at is what we just talked about, overperformers and underperformers, right? So usually when you see overperformance, that tells me I'm probably going to see a little more of that deck because it did well. There's people who look at this data and think maybe that's the way I should go. And then underperformance kind of, steers me away from, maybe wanting to play that sort of deck myself. In the end, if we were playing a PQ last week and we just talked about this, I 100% would have played Quinlan. Now we're talking about how does the data affect me? Quinlan did really well. It overperformed. It was highly represented. Does that mean it's going to be the it deck? I hate playing the it deck, right? Because now people are preparing for it, right? They're ready. They're putting in sideboard decisions for it. They think it's coming. Do I want to run the it deck into the next weekend? Probably not, So
and the last time Quinlan was in that position, he couldn't handle it.
Yep.
Right? He couldn't handle it. And I love Quinlan. Quinlan's one of my favorite decks to play. I haven't put as much time. Probably, I would say one of my favorite decks to play that I haven't put enough attention into recently. Right?
Same.
But I last time that it was that top dog, man, it got shot down real quick because not every deck is meant for that. I personally didn't, after Worlds, I didn't think that Han Blue was meant for that either. Right? So these are questions that are interesting. It's interesting to see that Kyle and I are looking at it from different perspectives. I don't really care that much that Talzin is the most popular deck, but if you're seeing that like it's just shit or not good, like, excuse my language, it's it's a challenge to convince yourself that everyone is wrong and you're right. Right? Typically when you're doing that, you're the jerk, right? You're the person who's wrong. But it's an interesting conversation to have, I think.
Well, Talzin's highly represented and underperforming its representation. That doesn't mean it's a bad deck. It doesn't mean it's a bad choice. It probably means some adjustments need to be made based on the way the current meta is moving, right? So in my view, some of these Talzins were getting a little tall. If aggro is really starting to be on the rise, perhaps that's where it was struggling a little bit, was getting got by some of these aggressive strategies. And you need to be thinking about that in your Talzin construction, for example.
Yeah. And I think that's part of my experience in these past couple of weeks as well. Like I've really been refining to be able to beat like really aggressive aggro and stifling control. And I felt good in those spots. Will I play it this weekend? You'll have to tune in here on YouTube and subscribe to find out what we do. Or you can just look at Melee or Swoo Base that we have pulled up here. Okay. Any other notes on the data and stuff before we get into some tier lists going into the weekend?
No, I think we pretty much hammered it, right? I would give a second shout out to Swoo Base, though. I mean,
oh my god,
this is the first time I really dug in and used this site. It's insane. It's incredible.
I love all the other. You know what? I really like Swoo Competitive Hub. I really love Swoo Meta. But whoever made this this site, big shout out. And if you ever see us, let us know. We'll buy an ice cream or some baked goods or something along those lines, because it's just awesome. And there's so much you could do. In another episode, we'll dive into some of the other stuff, but like as a quick little spoiler, you could like click on a leader and then see all of the deck lists that leader was represented over that weekend, and then see like visual images, see how they did into other decks, what the sideboards were, with their record, all in one neat area. And it's free 99, FREE. Shout out to Swoo Base, and we really do appreciate them. Okay, let's go over to another valuable but not as high quality site, and that's the tier maker. So these are what we're doing right now is we're going to tier out S through D to find out the decks that you should be worried about this weekend, the top decks that have the most chance to win, the ones you're preparing against, the ones you're thinking about. So questions, comments, thoughts, concerns?
No, just to hammer out the criteria. This is we're putting in a tier list of what we think decks you should play. Is that what we're saying going into this week, or decks we think will be played?
I think decks will be played is probably the heavier one, because what you should play is what you're good at. But like, this one is along the lines of what are you probably going to see, and where should you target your preparation?
Let's assume that everyone is equally bad at everything, right? So it's the same thing, right? Okay, so let's kick it off and just say, Who wants to take the first stab? We put in about like 10, 15 leaders here that we have seen some representation recently. May have missed some. Let us know in the comments how we messed up. Kyle, you're up first.
All right. Well, what's absolutely going to be in the top? I'll say Quinlan, just because he did so well last week. He's well positioned. You'll absolutely see Quinlan's, and we'll see if they're piloted by proficient players, but they'll be there.
Okay. I think Quinlan deserves to be up there as well. Not necessarily because you need to change your deck to play against Quinlan, but you do need to you need to change your play patterns a little bit in some cases. So preparation for Quinlan is definitely something I would rate as S-tier level preparation.
Okay. And Kyle Sharkey, that is. What's your pick?
If we're going on the next one, we'll stick with the S tier. I do think Boba. You need to be absolutely prepared for Boba for the same reasons. You don't necessarily have to change your deck because pretty much everybody's running some form of upgrade hate now anyway, and some way of dealing, like at least make sure you're prepared for the onslaught that is the amount of damage that Boba Data Vault can put out.
So do we think that this is S tier? Or do we think it's A tier? This is the first. So Quinlan, I think we're all on board that it's an elite deck. Did Boba just have a hot weekend, or what? Kyle, I see you being dubious as well.
Yeah, I would lean towards a hot weekend. Going back to the data here, there were three leaders that got a win, right? Quinlan got 2 wins, Boba got 2 wins, Sabine got 2 wins, right? So it definitely spiked the wins category. But if you look at the total number of Bobas that are across all of the top 8s, it was kind of those couple of wins and not much else, right? So they really spiked to the top, but overall representation was not that high. The other part is I think, Boba has a natural predator out there with Han, which we've seen go down a little, right? Mm-hmm. So it scared me bringing Boba because if you run into some Hans, that's going to be trouble.
I think for me, I would put Boba on the high end of A for this week. And if he does it again, I think that it goes back up to S. I think
that seems totally fair.
He shows it's hard to deal with a lot of decks. So, all right. So now this is one that I'm really excited to do. I don't know if this is being overly optimistic, but I think that the best pilot in the galaxy, Kazuda, belongs at the end of A tier. Not the tip of A tier, but I think for this coming weekend, he belongs in A tier.
I've got Kazuda in the middle of B tier, and I don't mean that as an insult to Kazuda. It could very well be the decks that I tend to play being very good into Kazuda as well. And so I'm making the bias known, but I do think he's one you should prepare for. But both the representation and the overall strength of the deck, I think, has him somewhere in the middle of the pack. And since we're only taking the top of the pack at this point for this tier list, puts him a little on the lower end of that one. That being said, if he does continue to perform, I think it's a similar kind of argument to Boba where he just gets bumped up because he does have a threat, or he does have the potential to spike, I would say, at any given time.
Kyle, I'll make my case after you.
Yeah, so Kazuda, looking at how he did at Worlds, you saw a couple spike into day 3, which was interesting, which kind of started to bring up the amount of people going, oh, I should give this a go, right?
Yep.
And so now we're seeing a little more Kazuda coming out of week 1 and week 2 and going up. I think he's definitely an emerging leader. He's on his way up. I wouldn't argue if you wanted to put him at the end of A. If we're not going to put him at the end of A, I'd probably put him at the beginning of B. I would lean towards end of A.
That's where I have him, and I'll tell you why. I think your points about Worlds are really well taken, and you saw a lot of different types. I played a Kaz Blue on day 2 that was like hyper aggro. The Kaz Blue that I play is a little hardier with shields. The Kaz Blue that got second in the Iowa PQ that lost to our friend Mickey, he was playing a creature package. On top of that, you see the Tarkin Town builds around and stuff. So I just think that when you're seeing representation in 2 colors like that, you're seeing wins, you're seeing second places, you're seeing tops. I think this is a week where we're going to see the amount go up and the success probably stay relatively similar. Because obviously, for the success of the high end to go much higher, that would be, he would belong in S tier in that conversation, right? But I think for me, and maybe we'll move it as we do other ones, but I think he belongs at the end of A tier. What's the vote?
That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with end of A.
I said I've got him in B, and I don't mind being like the outlier here. So,
all right, you're up, Kyle.
Yeah, I'm going to just take another obvious S tier in my view, and that's Han. I mean, you're still going to see Hans. Han's still a very good deck. He's not going anywhere. Now, he's not going to be the top of S. I think he's shown that he's beatable, but he's just a very good deck into a wide field played by a good player. You're going to see Hans in the top 8s all over the place.
Agreed.
I think that there's a pretty big separation between him and Quinlan. I'll be honest there. I think that a deck like Han can really shine when his counters start going down. Right. I think we're if we might see less Taos in that this week. I think generally speaking, that's a good thing for Han. I think we're going to start seeing more Quinlan, which I think is a bad thing for Han. I wouldn't be surprised if he won multiple PQs, and I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't win any PQs, to be completely honest.
I'm about to sound like Kyle, but you can just get got by Han if you're not ready for him. And I think that he's still easily one of the boogeymen of the meta.
Yep.
So,
yeah, to me, Han is, it's going to crush some of these aggro decks, right? If we see a lot of Sabine, a lot of aggro, man, if I can go cheer it into Daughter, good game, right? So, like, he definitely has his kind of, almost free wins. So, he'll be well represented.
Okay.
Yep,
Sharkey, your turn.
So this one might be a little bit of an outsider, but I think Gar Saxon actually does belong on the upper end of A tier.
Okay.
I don't know if he's the top.
Boba, make your case.
I would say right below Boba, but it isn't by a lot. Gar Saxon as and I'm thinking specifically of the ECL version, but the yellow version is also very good. And it's one of those aggro decks that is actually somewhat resilient to the way like Han would typically beat an aggro deck. Like, I don't think he really cares that much about Jared. He's got shields all over the place, and he can just run a few things into him and keep going. Worst case scenario, he gets the ECL Darth Vader out on 6. Like, he's going to get there at some point, and if you're not ready for the onslaught, man, he can push some damage fast.
It's hard to argue.
Yep. I've heard Justin say a couple of times that this is the best ECL Vader deck, and I agree. I tend to agree. Yeah, so it has some natural protection against force throw. When you've got shields on your units, I can't just throw a crate at your unit. I got to get rid of that shield first, right? Yep. So there's a lot of very interesting things you could do with him, but he's also susceptible or very susceptible to control, soft control. Power of the dark side, that's a problem, right? A lot of these hard removal, that sort of thing. So there's definitely areas where guard just loses, right? But generally, if you're not facing those strategies, I agree. Very, very strong.
Yeah, I would say that I think that he'll probably have better success than Kaz this week. I think that's fair to say as a guess. But yeah, I mean, the downside to having an aggressive deck with a 6-cost leader is fairly well known, right? There's some issues there. The shields do diddly versus power of the dark side and other things like that. So I think he has some tests to come out. Like, I think this week people are going to be like, okay, I'm thinking about Gar. I'm thinking about getting Vadered. I'm thinking about this big deploy on 6. Big test for him to see if he could handle having this kind of scrutiny. I'll take it with Towson. Okay. So I'm heavily considering playing Towson. Prior to the data, I was like probably just going to play Towson. I think Towson is an A-tier deck. I think that Towson rewards reps. And I think what I have learned in the past 2 weeks, and I could be completely wrong, but I've been testing a lot with the team, with friends, with randoms, etc. And I think the deck is more flexible than people are giving her credit for. I think there's different packages that you could include for different types of matchups that are really helpful. And I might have some pie on my face, some egg on my face next week when we come back here, but I haven't felt the hard control being as stifling for Towson as I think the data shows and how people are experiencing. So that's something that I've been thinking about, but I do probably, if I had to guess, she's probably going to have less spike results than Kaz this week, just because I wonder about me. Am I smarter than the data? Right? Is my experience better than the data? And it's hard for me to parse that as we're doing this kind of exercise.
Yeah, it'd be hard to argue not putting Towson either at the bottom of S, somewhere in S, or the top of A. I'd probably still put her towards the end of S personally.
Okay.
In the hands of the right player, this is the deck that just won Worlds, right? But I think we talked about before, a little more speciality here in the hands of the right player, right? I think we're finding out that when the masses pick this deck up, it underperforms, right? And maybe that's just, I need to spend more time with it.
Mm-hmm.
We've got another deck, I think that's a lot like that, the Kylo Tarkintown. Those were the finals. Those were the 2 decks in the finals of Worlds. So we're seeing a lot more play, a lot more people picking it up. But, as I run into some people trying to play these decks, I'm seeing a lot more poor play of these decks, which, I'm cool with. It gives me some wins. I think she's still, the value there is still towards the end of S, played correctly.
I think if you're looking to qualify this, to take some information from this, Towson's high point is easily S and her low point is easily bottom of B, right? And I think that points to the fact that she is a specialist deck. And I think that generally I would classify her as an S tier deck, partially because if you're trying to win a PQ, you're going to find the Towsons in the top 8 cut, and you need to be ready for them. All right. Those are the Towsons you really need to worry about. Sure, you can probably run through the ones who don't know what they're doing. That's generally not all that hard in my experience. But the ones who know what they're doing can absolutely make this deck do things that you were not ready for. She has a lot of flexibility, a lot of strong tools, especially in the resource 4 to 5 range, that make her really tough to beat. So if someone knows how to use those tools, they can absolutely give you an S tier level game. And I would personally keep her at the bottom of S.
Okay. Maybe my confidence has been shaken.
Yeah, hitting the time machine, when we're talking about specialist decks, to reiterate, this is like a Han Yellow, a Han Green. I think we have a couple of them right now with Quinlan and Towson. You could consider them S tier in the hands of the specialists, and to your point, Sharkey, all the way down to B in the hands of an unpracticed player trying to run one of these decks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Kyle, you're up next.
Oh, let's see which ones we have not grabbed here. I'll take another obvious one, Sabine. It's always been true of Sabine that you can spike an event, right? This has been true since set 1. It is true today. We saw it get a couple more wins. To me, this is, you just can't take her off S. You could put her at the bottom if you want. I'd put her ahead of Towson. I'd put her in between Han and Towson. But there will be Sabines that win PQs this weekend. There will be heavy representation of Sabine. There will be lots of them in the top 8s, right? To me, that is the definition of S. It will see wins. It will see multiple top 8s. It will be well represented.
Sharkey?
I had her a little lower, but it's just quibbling at this point, partially because the tools that are out there to combat Sabine are very good into Sabine. But like you said, you can never count her out. She's always going to be there. And some of them have started adapting very well to the tools that beat her. So like there's an arms race there a little bit. And if your tech to beat Sabine also requires you to untech other things, I think you're going to get caught out. And so I do think Sabine is one of those, I don't want to call it a gatekeeper deck. She's a little better than that, but she's one of those, like, if you forget about her, she will absolutely make sure you remember next time.
Yeah. If I don't play Towson, I'm likely to play Sabine. I think that there's a lot of interesting decks that can do things against other decks that Sabine just completely destroys. Okay, you want to set all these things up. Okay, Sabine's just going to push damage. There are some different builds that you could try. There are some different cards that you can include to deal with tough space units, to try to deal with turret. We've seen that happen. We saw at Worlds that it performed better than anyone expected. Then every week since then, we've seen really strong performances as well, but not widespread usage. Do we think that this is the weekend where Sabine becomes a top meta shareholder again?
I mean, I think it was already there. I think it already is a top meta shareholder. It was in week 2. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's all over the place. It's another one of those that I think is benefiting from the kind of the Han going down a little bit. The Han Blue specifically, I've found, has a very good matchup in Sabine. But as we see less of those, I think we see more Sabine. Again, we have a very balanced meta, though. So if you're taking a Sabine, I think in a number of ways, you're hoping to just kind of dodge your bad matchups and just get the win, right? It's similar to like a Palp Blue, right? Except for on the opposite end of the spectrum. You show up with the Palp Blue, you're just hoping you don't hit Sabine. But with the rise of Sabine, I think that's not a great choice. Sabine the other way around, I think you can have that run.
Okay. I think Sabine's in a great spot, probably better than most people will give her credit for. I don't think that she'll be more popular than Han, Towson, or Quinn this week. If that happens, it's probably a strong week for Sabine. I'll take one that our team might be playing or might not be playing, and it'll be my first B tier tonight, and that's Luke. I think that Luke is going to suffer from two things here, and that is Quinn getting more popular and Boba getting more popular. And I think that both of those decks put Luke in a tough situation in different ways. Obviously, Quinn is just well equipped to kill all of their units, and Boba is kind of just doing bigger, badder space things than Luke is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And, I've played that with Paul a little bit. We've talked it through. Quinlan's definitely a problem, right? I just going to turn off your Luke pilot ability, right? Hopefully, right? A lot of the time, Quinn's just going to ensure that you're not attacking with a fighter ever. So yeah, I think the rise of Quinn is challenging for Luke, but I still think Luke's a very good deck. It's a reasonable call.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think we'll see him get top 8s. I don't think we'll see any wins though. Okay, Sharky, you're up, or no, Kyle, you're up.
Oh, I'm up. All right, I'm gonna speed this up by taking a group pick here.
Okay.
I would like to take Anakin. Let's see, Anakin, Kit, and Yoda as a threesome.
Oh, okay.
And I'm gonna slap all 3 of them in B, and I'm gonna explain them all the same way. All 3 of these decks are crappy Han Blue. So if you wanted to take any one of these decks, you're taking the lesser version, in my view, of Han Blue. Now, they have their quirks. They have their advantages in certain matchups, why you might want one of these. Maybe you like the leader. Maybe you're targeting something specific. But into a wide field, Han Blue is just the better version of all these decks in a wide arrangement. You might pick one of these because you're trying to target something specifically. But to me, they're all a B choice compared to Han Blue if you're trying that strategy, a red-blue strategy.
I would agree with one minor nitpick, and the only nitpick is I agree in red-blue. I do think that Kit Green might end up being the better choice than Han and or any of those guys in green for reasons that are still undetermined, and the data doesn't back it all up, and it's more just my gut feeling and my testing so far. And so it's not a huge justification for me moving any of them up, but I do think that generally in the red-blue, you're right, Han Blue just does red-blue mostly better than these guys. In Anakin's case, as long as you get the initiative, and in Yoda's case, I like Yoda, but I don't see him competing with Han. Most of the time, Han just gets him too quickly. So
yeah, Kit Green really had a spike week last week. We have seen some content floating around. I think it's a fun deck to play. We'll see if he can kind of bring it up this next week. Sharky, your next pick.
I am next. Let's just make this the easy one. Cad Bane, bring him on up. I think he is personally a B tier. Maybe I'm being a little too hard on it because I know the deck very well and I know how everybody else feels about it. And generally, he's also a specialist deck. I don't think he's quite as well positioned as he was 2 weeks ago. He has a little bit of a rougher matchup into the the Boba matchup there. Though the rest of the guys that we have at S tier, I would say Cad's fairly good into. That being said, there is one coming that I think he has less of a good matchup into that we haven't gotten to yet. So I would say solid top of B tier, lower A tier. Depends on how good the pilot is of the Cad deck. But you're almost always going to see roughly 5% representation and roughly 5% conversion rate. That has not changed, I think, in almost a year of Cad Bane being in the meta, even when there was other things preying on the deck. So that's where I'd start.
So I think Quinlan's pretty good in CAD right now. I think Towson's solid into CAD. The data actually shows right now that Sabine is better into CAD, which is interesting how that might flip. I haven't played that matchup enough this set to really understand that data discrepancy. Do you have any takeaways from that, Sharky?
I go back to the specialist deck thing. I think there's a lot of people playing CAD poorly, and I don't mean that to say all CADs are bad or anybody playing it differently than I do is bad, but there's a lot of things that I see that are just mistakes that can get got, as Kyle likes to say. If you make one wrong call in the middle of a game, you can lose a game to Sabine. You can lose a game to, I think Quinlan's about as coin flippy as you get there. Yeah. I think CAD's good into Towson. But that doesn't change the fact that if you make one wrong call or resource one wrong thing, you're suddenly behind the 8 ball, and it's tough to recover. So,
Kyle,
yeah, I like the I thought I was going to be I was about to say, how have you not picked CAD and why is your choice S tier, right? But yeah, I'm surprised to see you put him down so low. I still think he's definitely at least the bottom of A, especially as we see the rise of aggro. I mean, CAD's always been kind of an aggro beater, right? Especially like you see like this, like these aggro decks that are going super aggro with multiple 1-drops. Like we saw the aggro version of CAD himself. Yep, we saw the double red Sabine. I would think CAD would eat those decks up, right? Just pinging everything off, killing stuff, controlling the board. So it's definitely a position to be able to eat up the rise of aggro. But the problem, of course, is going to be like the Blue-Green Villain, the hard control, that sort of stuff and obviously Boba we just talked about too. So it definitely has some challenging things, but I would leave it probably in the end of A.
So I kind of think that CAD actually struggles or can struggle at times into like that certain breed of aggro, right? Like think the Sabine Yellow from back in the day, but like the super wide, some shields on particular units, just things like that. And I think it just depends on what matchups it gets. I think that Boba probably does present some problems. What do you think the biggest one of those problems is, Sharkey?
Did you draw Jabba? Long story short, that one comes down to like, and I don't mean this to be like hyperbolic. That matchup is, did you draw Jabba? And if you didn't, did you draw a Relentless Pursuit to keep the board in check before Boba can do anything? The next addition to that would be, did you draw Bamboozle too? Jabba makes that happen, but Bamboozle does help when Boba's able to flip. And you're running that main now because of Kylo Tarkin Town anyway.
And just to be clear, it's Jabba because the big butt to soak up.
Jabba's got a big butt. Jabba finds you a trick. And in all of those cases, all of the tricks that are being run are good into Boba. Like, there's a lot of reasons that you need Jabba in that matchup. Actually, it's similar reasons to why Jabba's also very good in 2000. Even if, or similar, result, even if the stuff you're looking for from Jabba is very different.
Yeah, makes sense. I was going to ask the same question.
Cool. So I'll pull a Kyle and I'll do a group of the 3 control-ish builds. I'll start with Kira. I think she's a D. I do. I think that it's going to be hard for her to perform this week. But maybe I'm wrong. I'll see Kylo Data Vault in the top or bottom of A tier. And I think Iden belongs in the middle of A tier. And I think it for different reasons. I think Kylo is pretty explosive, but struggles into some of those aggro builds. I think that Iden is going to struggle into some of the Sabine players if that really grows in popularity. I think Quinlan is going to provide differing challenges for all of these different attacks. I think Kira, oddly enough, probably is best suited to beat Quinlan out of them, in my opinion. What say you, Kyle?
Well, I guess we have to clarify Kylo. There's 2 very different Kylo decks.
Data Vault that we're talking about.
So this is Data Vault specifically. Okay. I think you're being too harsh on Kira.
Okay.
I think Kira is in my experience today, in the Data Vault version, is kind of not as good Kylo, unfortunately. And I think that's because in the Data Vault version, one of the challenges I've had is cycling, getting through the deck, not getting to cards I need because you're running Data Vault. Kylo kind of solves that problem by just allowing you to cycle. Kira does give you the benefit of earlier board control, though, into like aggro, right? So there are certainly advantages. At worst, I would still keep Kira in B. I mean, there were Kiras that performed at Worlds. There were Kiras that made day 3. It's not strictly that much different than Kylo Data Vault. It's a very similar deck. I don't see how you could stretch them that far apart on the tier list when it's basically the same deck mostly. Sure. Iden is a little different. Okay. Iden is pushing much more into the hard control. I hate this deck. I want to put it down to D just because I hate it so much. I don't think it is a D deck. I just don't want to see it. So, that's my opinion there.
Yeah. I strongly disagree about a couple of things. And
cool.
First is that I don't think Kylo is that good as a Data Vault deck. That being said, I also think it's generally better than Kira as a Data Vault deck. Interestingly, Kira has become the specialist deck of the blue-green villain side here. I would say that Kylo Data Vault is probably a bit higher than Kira Data Vault, though, as Kyle pointed out, Kira is better positioned into an aggro meta than Kylo is. I just think that there's a red-white card that says Kylo sucks now because Kit Fisto's Ether Sprite. If most of the Force Throw available decks are running that card, they don't really care about Kylo flipping. So you're playing hard control in some fashion, and the cycling does help. That makes Kylo still good. I just don't see it being as good as like Iden.
The Kylo flip in the Data Vault version is way less important than it is in the Tarkin. The Tarkin Town version, it's all about the Kylo flip. In the Data Vault, it's really cycling your deck and turning on Anakin, right? So I don't think Ether Sprite really does much in either of those. Now, the Parliamentarian's a problem for activating Anakin, and people are running that in their sideboards.
People are still running that too, though. Like those are two cards.
You're not trying to end the game with his flip in the Data Vault version. You're kind of using him more for those 2 purposes, I think.
I agree with everything you're saying. I still think that there's a lot of tech out there for Kylo specifically, partially because of the Tarkin Town decks. And I think the Tarkin Town decks actually survive scrutiny better than the Data Vault deck does.
Okay, so are we generally in agreement that it goes Iden, Kylo, Kira?
Yeah, yes. I think so.
Okay, so that's one part of the conversation done, right? So is Iden properly ranked here in the high tier of A for you guys, or am I being too generous to Iden?
Results say you've got it in the right place. My hate for her says move it down.
So, I agree about the results. I don't necessarily know that survives scrutiny either,
Okay.
but maybe it's just because I'm coming up with a lot of ways to beat Iden Data Vault, and I've not had as much issue with Iden Data Vault with the decks I'm currently planning on playing this weekend. So again, bias is known, but I don't see Iden Data Vault being as big of a boogeyman as Garsax and ECL personally. I've found that Gar to be a higher threat. I think Iden Data Vault thrives in a certain environment, and I don't know that the environment is going to be right for Iden Data Vault to do that. I think the higher the mid range in the Han, Talzin, Quinlan representation, I think that is what Iden wants. But when the aggro starts creeping up there too, I'm not as convinced that Iden can keep up a lot of times, and so it just seems. Some of this could be that I don't know how to play Iden very well. So again, this is not a deck I play very often, but I've played against it a lot, and I don't feel like it has the legs to be consistently at the top.
So is it ranked higher
is our local
CAD or no?
Probably, but not by much.
Okay.
So what were you saying, Kyle?
I was saying, are we going to see Space Bear this weekend? Because that means you're going to have to be aware of Iden. Would be my guess.
I think you have to be aware of it, and you have to be ready for it. But the problem is, if you're ready for it, I feel like that deck is just not as. That's another one where if you look at it long enough, it folds.
So,
in my opinion,
are we cool with how A tier looks, or do we want Iden below Kaz, above Kaz? Where are we at?
I wouldn't move Iden down anymore.
Together, it's fine. Yeah, I think they're clumped together, and I think that's fine. I think all of them have potential to be problems if you're not ready for them.
So where's Kylo in this conversation?
I'd put him. I'd put him
top
of B.
I would say I'd put him just above the clump of the red-blue ones that we were talking about earlier. But whether he's ahead of or behind Luke, I'd say they're roughly similar.
Okay, I'm good with that. And I could admit that maybe I was being too harsh on Kira and too generous on Kylo, but such is life. All right, we got one pick left, and that's Darth Vader. So let's just do it together. Where are we at with Vader Pilot?
I've got him bottom of A, but I'm okay.
Yeah, he's going to show up. His challenge is that people are still aggressively sideboarding for him, aggressively making sure they're ready for him. One of the interesting things I think is that we saw a lot of bombing runs initially, and Vader's trying to adapt to that. So you're seeing scimitars. You're seeing shielded units. In fact, I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a really cool Vader Pilot blue deck that did well this weekend, and it was covering the wing. And it was all in on the shields to protect the whole Vader thing, Iden Pilot, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, Vader is trying to protect itself, I think, against bombing run, because bombing run could just be a blowout, right? Yeah. So the sideboards are starting to change, right? I'm seeing, I'm seeing the Jedi Starfighter with the 1/4 in Quinlan, right? Yep. Rather than trying to bomb you, I'm just going to take control of space early with that thing. Or we saw the grenade strikes out of the Kylo Tarkintown deck. So I think maybe the strategy to beat Vader's changing a little bit to kind of just control early and then race him, rather than kind of trying to pace him and then blow him out with bombing run. So I think Vader's hurting from that. We talked earlier, he's underperforming. So represented, but underperforming. I agree. Put him towards the end of A, maybe even high B.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that worked previously against Vader are still working. However, I am seeing some of the adjustments that Vader's are making, like the scimitar play, and there's a few others that I'm not going to
outmaneuver and stuff like that.
Exactly. The outmaneuver's an interesting innovation from Vader as well, though, and so I do think that they're starting to adjust. I just don't know how many people are still on, how many generalists are still on Vader as a pick up and play kind of deck.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a few at RPQ, I'm sure. Hi, Alex.
Yeah, definitely a few. I think what this is telling us, this is balanced. This is an extremely balanced meta. We were nitpicking between this, that, and the other thing. So we're done. We're done with the tier list. Let's leave them with something good. Kaz spiked last week. Kit spiked last week. Boba spiked last week. Who's going to spike this week?
Ooh, if I had to pick, I'm going to say the return of Han. I think Han's been held down. People are bad, people are giving him some grief, and he's going to swing back around.
Okay, the return of the Han.
I need another second. I'm still figuring it out. I actually don't know.
Okay. All right. I was going to take some time. All right. I think that we're going to see Quinlan underperform this weekend because of decks like what? That's the question, right? Like what's well positioned to take down Quinlan, and that's what leads me to the conversation with myself of saying I don't know if Quinlan is going to be able to get knocked out right now. I think that Quinlan is going to show dominance this weekend, and I think the only deck that's kind of trending up that I think is really well positioned to give it some problems is Sabine.
I was going to lean Sabine myself, actually, as I think that Sabine gets another spike in usage, and I don't think you can spike a whole lot higher, but it'll either stay or like increase at least a little bit and perform better, I think, than previous.
Yeah, that could be a good way to try to get Quinlan, right? Because Quinlan got a little taller. We're playing the deep Depas. We're playing 3 Hans. We got a little bit bigger, and then the sideboards used to include things like the hidden sharpshooter or the whatever that 5/3 Sentinel vehicle is, right?
Oh, the tank.
Tank,
yeah, the hover tank. They were putting a few things in there to try to combat Sabine. Those have disappeared from the sideboards. So maybe Quinlan's not as efficiently trying to be prepared for like a Sabine, right?
Mm-hmm. So we'll see how that goes. I'm excited to play with you guys this weekend. Excited to get some points on the board. I think at the last PQ, we had 6 out of 8 Cantina members in the top 8. Try to do, I guess, as well as that and bring the win home. We can't let the taco kid come back. He's too young. It's embarrassing, blah, blah, blah. But great stuff this week. We gotta get to practice. We're running a little late. The team is probably upset, but we're gonna head over and get some games in. A lot going on here on the channel. We just posted a video with Steve, one of our teammates, recapping his day 3 run with Towson. We have the Luke video up with Paul. We have the Han Green video up with Makai. And then this weekend, the return of midday matchup. Kyle, you guys doing that on Friday, or what's the plan?
Yeah, that's the plan. I would say I haven't figured out what decks we're going to match up with this weekend. So if you got something that you want to see, hit the comments, see what the Nerd Slayer will play, what I'll play. You know, we've been focused on real meta kind of matchups. You know, every now and then maybe we throw in something fun. So, you know, I don't know. There's a deck you want to see, maybe something I haven't put together yet. Let me know. I can see if I can get it done in time.
Great. Well, a lot of good stuff for you guys, and I'm excited to get some games in and see where the meta goes for season 1 of Star Wars Unlimited. Hopefully next time we talk to you, we all have more points on the board and maybe even a bye going to the Galactic Championships next year. So any final notes before we get on out of here?
No, I think so. Excited to play this weekend. So cool. See you guys there.
All right. For Sharkey and Kyle, I'm Jordan. Take care. See you later.